Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Once again, we are here to meet some wonderful guests today with me. And how is Ramadan going for all of you at this moment? It's the 21st today, and you are listening to Z on Ramadan.fm. Our studio line, as you know, is 0116 482 2086 077 488 55055. So today, if you have any questions for our guests, then please call in or even text or WhatsApp, or you can give us your views as well as to how you are in this world making positive change, making a difference to humanity. So, Mr. Richard Verity, welcome to Radio Ramadan. It is your first session here today with us. How are you?
It is. I'm very well. I'm very well. And I'd like to wish Ramadan Kareem to all your listeners. I should say, partly because I'm working in Saudi Arabia, partly because the charity that I run is a charity pretty much exclusively for Muslim teenagers, that I have had a long running engagement with Islam. In fact, just a week ago, I was in Medina, and one of the things that so impresses me about Islam is, in fact, Ramadan. This extraordinary moment when the entire Jummah does the same things at the same time, not just the five prayers, but also the fasting, the breaking of the fast. It's just an extraordinary thing to witness. Um, and although I was brought up in a different tradition, I know how to appreciate and be impressed by what I see in front of me.
So here's a wonderful example for all of you listening in right now that our deen, our world, our humanity is not about caste, color, creed, culture, tradition, religion. It's about all of us coming together to make a difference. Now, Richard, we've also got joining us today Mr. Yahya Abdi. He's one of our local inspirational young characters. Yahya, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's great to be here, and yeah, it's great to hear. I was in Saudi Arabia last Ramadan, in Makkah and Medina, and yeah, even though I am Muslim and I am here, it is everything's cranked up to a million when you're in Makkah and Medina. So yeah, it must be it's good to hear Richard talking about that. It's bringing me memories.
So here's what makes me so happy today, Yaya, that we have Richard, who's from a different culture, tradition, religion. Yeah, his work that he's doing and he's making a difference to thousands, millions across the globe with the work that he's doing, facilitating. I'm going to let you, Richard, tell us a story.
I love
Very,
stories.
very good. So this is a story of uh, extraordinary disappointment and dissatisfaction at the start. So in 2018, my wife and I were walking around a Scottish island, almost competing with each other on how much we wanted our lives to change. And this, despite the fact that she was an extremely successful novelist. She'd written five novels and was running her own publishing company and living a life of some privilege in North London. And I was doing something similar as Yaya, a bit like you, a management consultant. Um, and that's a life of airports and headquarters and hotels. But there was something very much missing. And I think this occurs to many people, particularly at this particular stage of life, where at the stage when your children have just left home and you are aware that you don't have an endless amount of time left to do a certain amount of good. And that was clearly the forefront of our minds as we walked around that Scottish island, that up until that point, our lives had lacked visible social impact, and it was gnawing at us. We wanted to do something right then, right now. So, so I was fortunate enough to be able to take a year off from my consulting firm, which was McKinsey, and become the temporary CEO of an NGO in Lebanon serving Syrian refugees. And it was a troubled year, in truth. What did I find? I found that I wasn't the best CEO in the world, in fact, quite the opposite. And that although I could understand very quickly what was wrong with this NGO, I didn't realize that you didn't try and change everything all at once. And halfway through that year, I think I lost the support of my leadership team. But it's also true that I also became very disenchanted with the NGO world at that moment. It was a world in which meetings did not necessarily start on time, deliverables weren't delivered, there wasn't obvious clarity of purpose. So at the end of that year, I think both my wife and I were rather relieved at the thought that we might be going back to London and to England and to the previous existence. But we hadn't reckoned on 40 teenagers that we had engaged with during the year. So how had I engaged with them? At that stage, I knew no Arabic. Since 2018, I've been learning Arabic steadily, challenging language. But I knew no Arabic, and I knew I wanted to engage with these children in a way that didn't require language. And I had perhaps my only moment of genius in my entire life. I found exactly what it was that I should do with them. And said, you might guess what that is. Yahya, because you don't know me, you wouldn't know necessarily. Can you guess what the perfect activity that requires no language to engage with teenagers might be?
Or, it might be me because of Ramadan, I'm fasting, but I'm thinking food. Is food it?
Food would be, I'm not a cook, I couldn't do it. No, well, so this is an Islamic sport now more than anyone else's, cricket. I decided to start coaching these children cricket, and they absolutely loved it. My wife, meanwhile, had taken 20 of the girls from that group of 40 and began teaching them about empowerment, self-respect, making sure that they didn't marry at the age of 12, which is one of the vices endemic in these refugee camps. And these children came to us like a trades union lobbying group and asked us to stay. They wanted the cricket to continue, they wanted the empowerment to continue. So instead of going back to London, I went to Riyadh to continue my consulting work there on the understanding I'd go back each weekend. And Micah, my wife, stayed in Beirut. And from that became Al Sama. These 40 children sensed weakness. They reckoned that they could get more from us if they only asked. And they wanted things in their lives. For example, none of them could read or write. None of them could do mathematics either. And this means reading or writing in their own language, Arabic, as well as obviously reading or writing in English. They wanted to speak English too. In short, what they wanted was a school. And yeah, I mean, listeners in Leicester, I think, probably could find some difficulty in imagining the kinds of lives that these children have led. So everyone knows there was the Syrian civil war starting in about 2012. So these children have experienced war. They have experienced ISIS, and that has left a very strong impression, particularly on the women and on the girls. And they are now living in grinding poverty in a slum on the southern outskirts of Beirut. You can look it up on the internet, Shatila. It's had its moments of fame, more like notoriety in the past. This is where the children are living. And what we decided to do was to try and to create a secondary school for these teenagers. We hadn't realized until then that only 3% of Syrian refugee teenagers actually finished secondary school. And that's because perhaps only 3% started. And they, so that was, and what made, why these conditions existed is because the Lebanese state was not providing schooling. NGOs provided very poor schooling, but only up to the primary school level. So as we started, there were only two organizations in the entirety of Lebanon that were offering secondary education. One was us, and the other was UNRWA. But they were offering only for Palestinian refugees, not for Syrian refugees. So the life prospects of these teenagers were extraordinarily bleak. And the boys were picking up plastic, the girls were getting married really much too early. And they were living in one-bedroom flats with 14 other family members. So we set up in 2020 the first Al Sama school. It was for 220 children, and it's actually in the Shatila refugee camp itself. The children walk to school. And what's remarkable about this school, and fast forward 5 years, we now have 5 schools. What's about this school is that we have attempted to create not just a bare bones education or a place where the children can be safe. We've attempted to create a world-class education in essentially a slum on the outskirts of Beirut. So what does world-class mean? It means that the children who arrive wholly illiterate, wholly innumerate, they become literate, they become numerate in just 6 months. So far faster than you or I did. And then if you teach them 44 weeks a year, which is what we do, so practically no holidays, the 2 Eids, Christmas, and time off in August, that's it. If you teach them intensively, and what's more, play cricket with them at the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, 3 hours each day. Cricket being a wonderful game in which you can learn leadership as well as how to win, how to lose. So you're engaging with these children 7 days a week. Then extraordinary things begin to happen. And we suddenly realized that if we were to keep these children for 6 years, we could perhaps do in 6 years what the rest of the world's education systems were doing in 12, namely creating undergraduates. Now, that's a claim we can't yet prove because the first students don't graduate out of Al Sama until the end of next year, or middle of next year. But we are hopeful. We are extraordinarily hopeful that these children will make that step. And while I would love to praise Al Sama as a very innovative institution, one that's created its own curriculum, the one that's created its own policies, one that has a value set that the children all are very keen to embrace, one that has a very interesting and open relationship with its donors, for example, one that actually provides increasingly the kinds of education that I hope most of the people in your audience would recognize as something that resembles their own. So very strong extracurricular, not just the cricket. We also take the children hiking in the hills. There's a chess club. We do TEDx talks. We have a music program. We have an arts program. Just the kind of things that a good school does provide. But none of that explains why Al Sama is so extraordinarily successful.
Right, Richard. Now, that is a good news story that we all need in this day and time currently, that the media seems to flourish on bad news and creates negative energy. Now, all of you listening in right now, this is another project on your list to support. How one person with his wife, went to Beirut and made a difference with an idea. Now, you take your good idea, which is your positive thought, and Allah will support you to make it happen good, and enjoin many other people to come along and hold hands together to make a difference. So, Richard, that is in brief what I have explained to our listeners as to what yourself and your good wife have achieved to date. Now, just remind me once again, what year did you start this initiative?
So the initiative is called Al Sama, and if you want to find it on the internet, you look for Al Sama Project.
What does Al Sama mean?
Al
There's an
Sama
Arabic
means,
meaning to this word Al
yes.
Sama.
Well, there'll be many of your audience who I'm sure will pronounce it better than I do and know exactly the meaning, but it means sky in Arabic. And the idea of Al Sama is that we are going to create new horizons for these Syrian refugee teenagers.
The sky is the limit, Richard.
And the sky is the limit for them.
That's right. Now, that is very interesting. So there's always meaning and reason to everything that we do, and even names have a meaning and a reason. So, Richard, now I'm particularly interested in your journey starting out from Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Do you wonder how Richard ended up in Saudi Arabia in the first place? And he knows more about that region than we do, sitting here in the city of Leicester. For all of you who don't know where we are transmitting from right now, we are in the city of Leicester on 87.7 FM.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people aspire to go there. I've been fortunate enough to go, and so have you, and you've been fortunate enough to live there. What I'm really interested in is this story, really powerful story. It was you just talking to a couple of young people and playing cricket, and that somehow snowballed into building this huge initiative, and they're now teaching people fully literate within 6 months, you said, and looking at getting graduates. It's really amazing that people can just from a little conversation and little interaction, and the power of sports and how that can really bring people together. But yeah, if you can take it away.
Now, I will add to that. What has inspired me, Richard, right this minute, and as soon as I finish this program, I'll be out of the door to implement some of the good ideas that you have put forward. Because, Richard, time waits for no one.
Yeah.
And we cannot waste time. A good idea has to be implemented fast, at the speed of lightning if you can. So what inspired me, about Richard, is I've always been championing to say that the education is 200-year-old curriculum from nursery, primary, secondary, university to produce an undergraduate. Now, if you are fast-tracking that to 6 years, then you are speaking my language, right? What I've got to do now to see if I can beat that and make it 5 years, right? And to take, only this morning I received an email, 20 destitute children sleeping at railway shelters, bus shelters, sleeping under bridges, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and Oscar, my man on the ground, he says, Zed, we got to do something to help these kids. He's 19 years old, Oscar is.
Is this in Uganda?
In Uganda.
In Uganda,
This is Uganda. And he said, we got to do something for these children. And we cannot let them be wasted away. Now, this is the story across the third world in all these war-stricken countries that you hear that story. And sometimes you think, well, I cannot change the world, but I can make a difference to a few people that will cross my journey of life. And that's exactly what you have done, Richard. So all these projects, they need financial support. Now, Richard is at McKinsey, one of the world's largest consultancy firms. They don't consult companies, they consult governments. That is the size of their company. And they have this CSR policy where they will allow a member of staff to go and do some good NGO work in another country. Now, we live in England. We don't have an NGO system here. And in the third world, every third world has a lot of different charities coming from across the globe to come make a difference. Now, what I'm asking, requesting kindly, all the people in our city, in our country, England, that every company should allow time for their staff to go out and do something meaningful to make a difference to our planet in the form of making a difference to another human being. This is where I'm requesting, and we're also going to be requesting for all of you listening in that during the month of Ramadan, you have allocated your zakat, you have allocated your sadaqah and your lillah payments, that we should support the journey of Al-Sama in Beirut, and whatever funds we create for them, we will all take part in the city of Leicester, and Leicester will have a small footprint in Al-Sama. Maybe 1 square meter of your cricket pitch we can lay claim to, and be very proud of that, Richard.
Well, indeed, you could probably lay claim to more. So thank you for mentioning money, which of course is required if you're going to set up schools and pay teachers and rent cricket playgrounds, all of those kinds of things. And I mentioned the website, www.alsamaproject.com. That's a very easy way for people who want to engage. And because we work in refugee camps, we can make a very small amount of money go a very long way. So, I mean, let me just, something like £100, that's not such a small amount of money, but £100 would pay for the complete education of a child for a full month. Maybe rather less, maybe more like £80 would pay for complete education for a child for a full month. A child that would otherwise have no education at all and no prospects at all. So there is that. But I'd love to kind of follow up, Zed, on something you just said about straight after this call, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do something. There are moments in life where you have to just follow the routines, bring up your children, do the work that's been given to you. There are every now and again in a life moments where you can do a little bit more than that, where you can actually follow your heart. And those are very exciting moments. There are moments that, and there'll be people in your audience who perhaps are feeling that this is one of those moments. I could now, if I wanted to, click on a website, but that's not enough. I want to do something more than that. And for those people, I would encourage you to come and visit. It's about a 2.5-hour flight. You could take a long weekend in Beirut. It sounds a strange thing to do, spend a long weekend in a refugee camp. But if you were to do it, you would meet these extraordinary children who are the secrets of our success. They have this extraordinary work ethic, this extraordinary determination to succeed. They would love to meet you, Muslims living in Britain, but you would love to meet them. Yeah, they have amazing life stories to tell. And seeing Shatila, seeing Burj Al Barajni, seeing the tent encampments in Becca is something to do certainly before you die. These are very different places from anywhere in Britain, anywhere in Leicester, and worth seeing. So follow your heart maybe, and see where it takes you. And then, yeah, if you are a person with religious belief, you suddenly have this sense that Allah is perhaps guiding you, and guiding you in a way that is creating far more fulfillment for you than you could have created for yourself.
That is indeed a good idea. So any one of you listening, they want to send their children for a experience, often in universities, when they do a year out, and it'll be a wonderful idea if we could collate a few persons from the city of Leicester, and we can go and visit. Now, I'm very much a champion for doing things collectively from different cities in the country. In England, our major cities being Birmingham, Leicester, and to promote this initiative is that we can do it collectively as a city of Leicester, city of Manchester, Bradford, throughout the country, and it adds a lot of power, as I would say, to the whole project, and a little bit of ownership it instills into people that we from the city of Leicester made a difference. Now currently everybody I know is collecting funds for the atrocities, the displaced human beings in Gaza. Now, of course, the whole region has issues because there is overspill. Then they will come into neighboring countries like Lebanon, and they end up there. Not forgetting to mention that 2 million people are currently being thought about to be displaced into poverty-stricken countries in Africa, being Somaliland, South Sudan, which is something really makes me sad. And I think, Richard, the whole region has got issues, and currently to bring attention to everybody is that whenever we are doing these collections, the big problem is to how to reach that collection, your money, your food, your truck. You can't even get past the border, and perishables are absolutely destroyed within 3 weeks, standing at the border in a truck. And the logistics are absolutely awful, whether they are financial logistics to move the money, there's no bank to move it to. It's all gone, destroyed. And the region has suffered for many, many decades. I would say 80 years the region has been in turmoil. And we haven't seen anything different in this particular part of the world. So give our listeners a little bit of geography to explain to them exactly where you are in relation to these neighboring countries where the kids are coming from, Richard.
So Gaza is the epicenter of the Middle East disaster. We are a ring or two away from Gaza, but still very much affected by it and in the same world. So the refugee camps that we operate in Lebanon are in fact Palestinian refugee camps. Many of the children that we have are Syrian, but actually Palestinians in essence, and coming from camps like the Yarmouk refugee camp in Damascus. So we are part of this unfolding tragedy involving the Palestinians, but not just the Palestinians. We are also part of the geopolitical situation that every now and again erupts into war. So from September to November of last year, we were being bombed. And it was one of our scariest moments, but also one of our proudest moments, that in war, and I'm sure the people of Gaza know this all too well, education is one of the first things to go. And we decided very deliberately that we were going to, even as people began to scatter out of Beirut, some went back to Syria, we decided to continue our schools, firstly online, not terribly successful, but we nonetheless kept the community together. And then secondly, having registered ourselves with United Nations, which in theory protects you from bombing attacks. I'm not sure in practice it always does, but in theory it does. We then reopened our schools, and for the month of October of last year, we were the only schools in the whole of Lebanon that were still operating. So we have seen a share of the conflict that the Gazans have seen, still more so. As of 2 weeks ago, we set up our very first school in Syria, which is a war-torn country. And I've just been looking at the videos that Micah and Kadria, Micah's the CEO, Kadria is the Chief of Operations for Al-Sama, took when they were traveling to Syria. And you see the familiar images, these concrete buildings that have become shells, piles of rubble on the streets, children and people with little to do and little to eat and no real hope. So we have now our first school of 100 children on the edges of Damascus. And we hope that in our very small way, but maybe not so small, said Yahya. I mean, the extraordinary things about teenagers is that you have no idea of their potential. You have no idea what they're going to do in the next decade, or the decade after that, or the decade after that. So it's not inconceivable that these children, we have 1,000 of them in Lebanon, now 100 of them in Syria, and we would love to open more schools, both in Lebanon and in Syria, that these children will be the children that we will rebuild the Middle East, a safer and better and more civilized Middle East than the one that we have at the moment.
So, Richard, how about this idea? When we are on the radio, we're not just talking, we are working. Of course, we don't get paid for it. Mm-hmm. That's another story. So we can do a collaborative effort together with you to take this, your passion, your narrative, your ideology, to even Uganda, where I'm very active.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. It sounds fascinating.
And we can show the world how we can do positive collaboration as being human beings from different faiths, different cultures, and how we can work together for the betterment of humanity. What do you think about that? Yeah,
100%. I mean, the children are the future, and they're not only the future; they are the present. They are right here, right now. They need to be invested in, because if they aren't, I've just had a message actually that the Leicestershire Violence Reduction Network have this show on in their office. So
that's wonderful. So
they work with some of the most underprivileged young people across Leicestershire, and they are real advocates of sports. I know Megan is in that. She might be in that office, but she is a sports coordinator investing in young people around there. So yeah, welcome in. If you want to send a message in on WhatsApp, it's 077-488-55055. Keep on coming in.
So you see, in Leicester, it takes them a little time to get into it. Many of the people are doing their Dhuhr Salah, and some of them are recovering from Suhoor of morning time. But once they get into it, they are responding. So today's objective is all of us to learn to make a better world tomorrow by engaging not only locally but nationally and also globally. So we shall continue to profile this program and to find a delivery from it which is positive for all of us, and we can all benefit from it, engage as many people as we can from the city of Leicester with Richard and the Al-Sama, take the Al-Sama to Uganda, do a joint project over there. Every journey has got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's really important to invest in good hearts, good minds, good teams that are doing amazing things all over the world. I mean, there's education, it needs to change here itself. So I'm thinking that we can learn from Al-Sama from here. So yeah, the more success that project has over there and the more it spreads from Lebanon to Syria, let's make it happen all over the world.
So we take our school in Uganda and we create entrepreneurs. That is where my forte is, creating young entrepreneurs, whether they are selling a banana and they grow up to become successful businessmen. That is where my strength is, Richard, which I share with you and I share with all the listeners. If we can get these young kids, 12 years old, sleeping under bus shelters and we can make a difference to their lives by teaching them, making them literate within 6 months, Yaya,
Within 6 months. That's amazing.
and then start to teach them the process in the business. Now, we are all consultants, aren't we, Richard, in this world?
It sounds as if we might be. Certainly, Yaya is. I am. Zed, are you a consultant? I thought you were more as an entrepreneur, but maybe you're a consultant in part as well.
Yes, the two hats, they go hand in hand, you know. You wear one hat when you start the journey, then you switch over to the other hat when you process through that journey. So the two, they do work together. And then what I'm excited about, Richard, with you, is the thoughts that he had with his wife. He put them into action.
Yeah.
And is from England, North London, somewhere in Crouch End or that region, Hendon and Barnet, and all the other places I know in North London, Edmonton. I could go on and on. No doubt I'll catch the right town where he's from. And he went all the way to Saudi Arabia, and from Saudi Arabia, he ended up in Beirut.
Yeah.
And
What a journey.
and learned about the history of atrocities in that whole region, which is very impressive. So, what do you think, Yaya? Are we up
Yeah.
for it?
I mean, I'm up for it. Are you up for it? We already know that
So-
the guest is up for it. He's been doing it for a long time.
When are we going there to Beirut?
Well, that's the question. We need dates. We need flight times. I should have perhaps said this at the start. I mean, Al Sama in Beirut feels like a long way from Leicester. Actually, we have 3 connections with Leicester that really matter to us. I mean, the first is turning up on this radio station, but we have 2 more. So Leicestershire Cricket Club is a cricket club that has paid us attention, and indeed the chairman of Leicestershire Cricket Club, Mahmouda Duke, has been one of our kindest, most generous supporters. There may be people on the call who know her. And then, perhaps even more importantly, Leicester University has been one of the most active universities in the whole of the country for engaging with Al Sama and thinking about how they will integrate the Al Sama students as potentially undergraduates at that university. So, yeah, so the bridges between Shatila and Leicester may be invisible, but they are very real.
Wow.
Of course, we are well aware. Mahmouda Duke, she has a strong association with radio from when I had started radio with Muhammad Jusub in 2015, 2016 onwards. So we are aware, and maybe we'll work together on that project. But I will remind one of the listeners, send me a text that Zed, how did you get involved with Al Sama? Well, after around the COVID time, we set up a group which was cricket enthusiasts. It's called Heavenly Help Us Cricket Club. It was Heaven Help Us Cricket Club. It was founded by Sadiq Patel, very, very passionate individual, and he introduced Al Sama to Heaven Help Us Cricket Club, and we then would interact with each other, informing about Al Sama's projects and what they're doing and what kind of support they need. And this is how we were engaging before COVID period. And we are now here almost 7 years later, and we are on radio. And from radio we excel, Richard. We go forward, and we step up our gear, and we make things happen.
Well, and the Heaven Help Us Cricket Club that you mentioned was, before COVID, actively thinking about coming to play cricket against us. And then COVID came, and then war came, and the idea went slightly cold. But peace has arrived. There are no pandemics. It would be wonderful to have cricketers come out from England. Either teenage cricketers, that would be the best. But if not, adult cricketers, male or female, we desperately need to have some international competition.
Okay, great. So from our cricket club, I will get a team together and they can join us, me and Yaya, and we'll come over there. I think if you read the chain from a couple of weeks ago, there was already discussions going on. Sadiq had initiated that we bring a team out, and he was asking for volunteers who was going to come and join us on that tour. So another question for you here, Richard. How do UK's changes to its policies affect relations with UK charities working abroad?
Is that from the audience?
Yeah.
Okay.
For one of the listeners.
So I think what you're referring to there is the what used to be called DFID, the kind of the foreign aid budget being reallocated essentially for military purposes, and that for many people, myself included, is a great regret. Those foreign aid budgets, and I've seen them in action in Lebanon, I've seen them elsewhere too, do an extraordinary amount of good. I mean, do an extraordinary amount of good for the people on the ground, and my goodness, they help Britain's reputation as well. So removing all of that is a great shame, however, it does not affect Al Sama at all. Al Sama, for better or for worse, has managed to build up its support base, one relationship after another. We are largely supported by individuals. We have a few institutions, but it's mostly individuals that pay our costs. And it's individuals who have turned up on Zoom calls, visited Shatila, turned up to some of our events in Britain, individuals that feel that they're not just giving money, but that they have some kind of connection with particularly the children in the camps. And those kinds of donors are extraordinarily loyal. They make Al Sama part of their lives. It becomes a purpose for them just as much as it's a purpose for me. And they don't donate 1 month and stop donating the next. They tend to stay with us.
Okay, now we got some homework I'd like to discuss with you, Richard. That we do some discussions on the collaboration. We start that off prior to doing a Zoom call between your children and our young children in Uganda.
So we would love that.
They can do some Zoom chit-chatting with each other and build up that relationship. And
what age are your children in Uganda?
We have, right now we have 20 children that we coach them, mentor them on Saturdays, and then we give them some goodies, we give them books, we give them pens, but the next 20 are the ones, the bus shelter kids who have nowhere to sleep. That is our next 20 that we are working on. And Yaya, you will assist me with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we get the city of Leicester engaged with Al Sama and create many numbers to join us to put the Leicester Al Sama relationship to be stronger between individuals.
We might see some of their students here soon.
And we shall profile all of this in a little bit of a small, meaningful documentary between the three of us and your experience here on the radio and our homework that we've discussed. And we do the 1, 2, 3. Are we up for that, guys?
I'm definitely up for that.
Great. Now we agree on that, and that's as simple as it is, you know. As simple as it gets. The work of humanity is all based upon common ground and positive energy. Our good thoughts to convert into good words of action and good actions to perform. Let's be what we're good at, doers.
Yeah.
Are we doers, guys? Or are we talkers?
Doers with a bias to action. Let's do it.
Richard, thank you very much. We got 20 seconds left, so give us a last message.
I think you've delivered the last message. I mean, there is, in some ways, this all feels very complicated, very difficult. In
Right.
some ways, it's
Guys,
broadly simple.
we come to the end. Richard, you and I will pick up on the phone. Thank you very much for today.
Thank